The Federal Reserve is in quite the pickle. It has to make a decision, and it's a life altering decision. You see, what's going on is that the American economy is pretty much collapsing, and it's going hyperinflationary. I mean, it's not happening right now. Just right now, we just have regular old inflation. But if it keeps on going in this direction, we are going to have hyperinflation. We are going to have a situation where, you can't buy a cup of coffee for less than 20 bucks. We're going to get there, okay? And we're going to get there so very quickly if things keep on going. I mean, not tomorrow, but certainly in the next, 18 to 30 months, no question, okay? So the Federal Reserve is aware of this. They realize that the rise in commodity prices is creating this inflation. It's also realizing that certain other factors and problems with the supply chain, problems caused because of the COVID lockdowns, are finally rearing their ugly head. And of course, the Federal Reserve is very aware of how the Biden administration essentially printed up a whole boatload of money and injected so much goddamn cash into the system. That's just absurd, right? So the Federal Reserve, they're not stupid, okay? They lack judgment, perhaps, but brain power, they got it. And they understand more or less what the hell is going on. But the thing is, see, there are only two ways to deal with a high inflationary environment. Either you let it run its course, or you halt it by way of raising interest rates. Now, this is what Paul Volcker did back in 1980. See, the United States was going through a very weird inflationary problem, a product of supply chain issues, a recession of the 70s that hadn't really worked itself out, and also the 79 oil shock of the Shah of Iran. All kinds of problems were cropping up, and that's why inflation was happening in the late 70s into the early 80s. In 1980, Paul Volcker hit the brakes hard. He rose interest rates to, I believe, 20% at one point, the Fed funds rate. It doesn't really matter exactly. I'm trying to remember exactly. I used to know all these numbers like off the tip of my tongue, but I've forgotten them. But that's not important. The important thing is to understand more or less what happened in 1980. Paul Volcker hit the brakes hard. And the American economy just went into a recession, the 81-82 recession. I mean, it was just like that, like a car crash right up against a wall. They hit the brakes hard. And the whole thing went tits up, okay? But the thing is, after that, the dollar was rock solid. And what happened also is that because of this hike in interest rates and the collapse of the economy, a lot of bad debt got written off. A lot of good things happened because a lot of times when you hit the brakes hard on the economy, a lot of the malinvestments, poor investments, speculative investments, they get blown out. And the economy emerges leaner and meaner, if you will, okay? I'm grossly simplifying for the sake of this video, but take my word for it, and most economists will pretty much agree with what I'm saying. But the point, today, see, back in 1980, the U.S. economy was a lot stronger. There was a lot more manufacturing and a lot less service. And most important of all, there was so much less debt. Debt is what's killing us, okay? The United States, right now, you add up all the debt it actually has, not just federal, but also state, municipal, and agency. The United States has over 200% GDP indebtedness, just the governments, okay? And insofar as people are concerned, between their student loans and their mortgages and this, that, the other, they are so over-leveraged. And so what happens is that when you are over-leveraged and interest rates rise, you are clobbered. You go bankrupt, quite frankly, because you can't afford to service the debt. And once you no longer can service a debt, the creditor demands payment and starts to liquidate the collateral, whatsoever that collateral may have been. And so all of a sudden you're fucked. It's as simple as that. That's the technical term. Fucked. Yeah. Okay? And so that is why Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve is very leery of raising interest rates, even though he knows that he has to in order to defend his currency, the dollar. And so he's in this quandary. If he lets the dollar inflate away, it's going to get away from him. If he hits the brakes with interest rates, the interest rates, of course, bring down inflation because, of course, it makes the cost of money higher, and therefore money becomes more valuable, i.e., It's the reverse process of inflation. Inflation starts to the currency rather starts to deflate rather than inflate. That's why you raise interest rates. I should have explained this before, but better late than never, I suppose. Anyway, the point. See, Jerome Powell knows what he has to do. He has to either let inflation run its course or hit the brakes. And the problem is that he doesn't dare do either. Because if he lets inflation run its course, he knows that the currency is going to collapse into a hyperinflationary mess. How does he know this? History. There have been other countries and other times that have had the exact same problem that the US dollar is having. Most famously in Germany in the post-war. And there was that thing called Weimar Germany, and the Weimar hyperinflation, that time. And the Germans, they were smart customers back in the 20s. They weren't fools. They're just as smart as the guys running things now, but it got away from them. Different reasons, yes, and I know that people will say it was because of reparations, blah, blah, but the parallel, the analogy holds. And in other countries, like Zimbabwe, for instance, same thing. And the United States has been printing money. It's printing money because it can't actually afford all of the military and all the social programs and all the low taxes with the current tax base that it has. That's why the United States has been going into debt, and it's been monetizing that debt. It's been able to get away with this money printing because of the petrodollar and the mechanics of the treasury bond market worldwide that's benefited them. And in fact, one could argue it's the reason that the U.S. economy has had the prosperity it's had over the last 30 years. If that system weren't in place, the United States would have gone bankrupt and would have gone through a major financial crisis, probably in the late 90s. Yeah, not kidding. Like a depression kind of crisis. Since mid-1990s, the United States has been cruising on the financial architecture and creating this false sense of prosperity. And the bill is due. And the currency is inflating away. And the only way to stop it is to raise interest rates. But if you raise interest rates, everybody's going to go bankrupt. And in the service-oriented economy of the United States, it's not merely that people will go bankrupt. It's that all of a sudden you will destroy and annihilate the entire economy. Because see, when you have a manufacturing economy, you have a factory. And if that factory, if the company owning the factory goes into bankruptcy, that factory passes to the hands of somebody else because it's still an asset that exists. But in a service economy, if the company that provides a service goes bankrupt, there's no real asset. It's just the organization of people. The company goes bankrupt, and that whole industry, right out the window, it's gone forever. You see the difference? And this is a major difference. Again, I'm grossly simplifying for the sake of this video, but you have to understand the difference between a manufacturing economy and a service-oriented economy. In a manufacturing economy, you actually have something. In a service economy, you don't have anything. And it goes bankrupt, and it's like nothing. Everything is gone. There's no machinery, no factory, no nothing. And they don't even own the offices. They just rent them. You see the situation here. And so raising interest rates will literally leave the American economy with nothing. It'll be like the Great Plains, flat and empty for miles and miles. That will happen to the American economy if they raise interest rates. And so that's why Jerome Powell can't. And so that's why the dollar is going to hyperinflate. Because the mass bankruptcy of the entire nation is a worse outcome than a hyperinflated currency. And more to the point, when you let the currency hyperinflate and the debt is in fixed amounts, it's not readjusted for inflation. Well, as your currency hyperinflates, the debt that you have decreases. So Jerome Powell and the people at the Federal Reserve must be thinking to themselves, hyperinflation is really bad. And a lot of people are going to lose everything. A lot of people are going to fall into poverty, of course, because if you're a working family earning the median salary in the United States, or the median income, rather, in the United States, is about $55,000 a year. You're earning $55,000 a year for you and your family, between you and your wife, say, and everything starts to inflate, and you're getting paid the same amount, you're going to be in the poorhouse, inevitably. I mean, if your grocery bill, say, is $200 a week, but because of inflation, all of a sudden it's $1,000 a week. Well, you're basically earning $1,000 a week at $55,000 a year, right? And so you're not going to be able to pay for food, or you will be able to pay for food, but not much else. You see the problem? And so inflation inevitably hurts middle classes, even upper middle classes, even you professional types who think that you're going to be insulated. The only people who are truly insulated are the really rich people. The really rich people who don't even notice when their grocery bills quadruple. They don't notice it because they're rich enough that it doesn't matter. But you who are not so rich, you're going to notice. You're not going to be able to pay for it. You're not going to be able to pay for heating and rent and food and gasoline. You're going to have to decide between those four: heating, rent, food, and gasoline, transportation, right? You're going to have to, of those four, you're going to have to cut back on all of them or somehow get rid of 2.5 of them because you're not going to be able to afford them. See? And that's going to be true for 80% of the US population. So that's why inflation is so scary, because it makes everybody poor. And so you see the problem? The only people who are not affected are the rich. And the only people who wind up coming out on top are those people who are overly indebted, like corporations, like the government. Those guys make out okay. And remember, government workers, they get their salaries readjusted for inflation. You don't, probably. So that's why. That's why the hyperinflation is coming. And nobody's going to stop it. And certainly not Jerome Powell and the gnomes at the Eccles building. They're going to let it happen. Because raising interest rates would hurt the rich people. But letting hyperinflation happen, it's just you plebes who are going to suffer.